Hello, my friends. We're going to take a look at a topic that has been in my mind for a while, and it's about the hybridization of two project management approaches, the world of Agile and the world of Predictive, if you will. To underscore the world of Agile, and take a look at some of the elements of Scrum. And from the world of Predictive, I'm going to take a look at some of the details in the PMP guide. Now, these are two very solid frameworks that can be used to manage projects. There is a misconception, though, that predictive projects are managed in an unwieldy and draconian way. And those are some of the things that I seek to correct when I introduce my clients to hybridized project management. The best of both worlds, in my opinion, from the world of Scrum, there are some things that I will definitely put into this hybridization bubble. And from the world of the PMBOK guide, there are some things I would put in. For the world of Scrum, some of the takeaways that I would absolutely subscribe to are as follows. I'm going to put them here. I'm going to use green. And while I do that, I will also say that many of these things are used in other agile approaches. So I'm a huge fan of the concept of a transparent product backlog. I'm a huge fan of a sprint backlog. And something else I've found to be very useful is the concept of user stories. Also, daily stand up, priceless, absolutely priceless. The product backlog is very transparent. It helps you see what is coming down the pike. The sprint backlog helps you focus on what needs to be done within the short amount of time in front of you. And we could call it an iteration, we could call it a sprint. User stories help you get down to the nitty gritty of what you need and why you need it. The daily stand up is a risk mitigation device, if you ask me. We also have the sprint review, which I think should be done by every team at some level, whether predictive or otherwise. And I also very strongly subscribe to the concept of the retrospective. I subscribe to the idea of the minimum viable product, because that again is a risk mitigation measure. Early feedback is going to help. And I also subscribe to the concept of the PSI, the potentially shippable increment. And that again is a way value can be offered to the client as quickly as possible. So when you take a look at these elements, these are things that I, as a hybridized project manager, would like to add to my mix of things as I see fit. Okay? So that is from the world of Scrum, and those are things I quite subscribe to. In addition to that, we also have the concept of sprint planning and that goes without saying, not to make it too prescriptive, but you should always be priming that backlog. You should always be prioritizing that backlog. It's a good practice as well. Now, going over to the PMBOK guide, the Project Management Body of Knowledge Guide, is a book I very much, of course, I love the book and respect what uh, colleagues have done over the past number of years. And there's some really powerful takeaways, things that have been done over time that I think will be very helpful on projects, be they small or large. These are not the unwieldy aspects, if you get what I mean. So, some of the things that I would definitely like to take away from the predictive world is the idea of a project charter. And this does not have to be an unwieldy big charter. The charter just authorizes the project or the endeavor, puts it on the map. Even in the world of Six Sigma, this is used. It's a good practice. The second practice I quite espouse is the concept of the identification of stakeholders. So, a stakeholder register and all that goes into the creation of one. For example, the stakeholder cube and the power interest grid. Those are two really good takeaways. And having a discussion around the salience model is also a good thing. When it comes to planning, planning could be a slippery slope, so it has to be traversed with caution. And for that reason, the big takeaway I would put here overall would be a concept of a project management plan. Okay. For medium sized endeavors, I would definitely advise this regardless. The plan doesn't have to be unwieldy, but I would say that at a minimum, the plan could contain a one sentence or two sentence statement about each of the following areas: about the concept of change, the concept of scope and requirements, and managing a schedule, the concept of managing cost, quality, resources, communications, the concept of managing risk should be discussed, procurements, and stakeholder engagement should all be discussed. And this could be a one pager, it could be a half pager, it does not need to be unwieldy. Some other things I would take away from the aspect of planning are having a high level schedule or timeline, the schedule baseline itself, the concept of a WBS, because even Agile espouses a similar breakdown, the concept of a team charter, the concept of reports. And these reports could be tailored, they don't have to be huge and insurmountable. I like the concept of formal closure. Closure is good, and when we close out a project or phase, it's a good thing. So I would say closure, that concept. And I like the concept of the 5 process groups at that high level and the 10 knowledge areas for whatever purpose they're used. It's up to the project manager to use the reference of them or the management of them as he or she sees fit. So when I take a look at Agile and Predictive, there are things that you could take. So talking about the product backlog, to map this in, this is really going to be traced to the area of scope. So this will be under scope. The sprint backlog would be under scope as well. User stories would be under the aspect of scope and requirements. I would look at the daily stand up as an integration, a risk, and even a schedule type of interface. The sprint review, I would look at this as one of scope to validate scope. The retrospective would also be looked at in the monitoring and controlling process as part of that check piece of the PDCA cycle. So I would see a retrospective as being more like a final review, an introspective look of at yourself. At the same time, we can also put this into executing because it's partly checking the team, but at the same time, it's also learning lessons. So this could be looked at as being an interface of executing and monitoring and controlling as well. The minimum viable product for feedback will definitely be a monitoring and controlling thing. And the concept of the PSI would be an executing, a monitoring and controlling, and a closing thing for me. Executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. So when I look at these at this high level, I do not see methods at war with each other. Instead, I see methods that can complement each other. The product chartering stage would come before your product backlog. Your stakeholder register will come before your product backlog. Your project management plan would come before the backlog, and sprint backlogs are totally finished across all sprints because you're going to be tweaking iteration to iteration. So it's not done until the work is done. Your project management plan continues this evolution and evolving. The schedule baseline, it's something you would do all throughout, but you would have a skeletal idea before the backlog is even started so you know where you're going. You have a vision, right? Or it could be looked at as something you derive on a sprint by sprint basis. That baseline could morph and change as you proceed. The WBS, again, it's something that happens all through, but it would complement the product backlog and the sprint backlog. Reports, things like your burn down charts, your burn up charts, this is not new to the world of Scrum. And of course, final closure comes when either everything is done or you've got enough things done that you realize you don't need everything else. So I see these as being very complementary. And with a skilled hand, this could be a real power tool. There's one more thing, however, I do want to stress here, and it is by far one of the most important concepts of all. And I'm going to put it here in Scrum because it is all centered here. It's the concept of servant leadership. The Scrum Master is someone who is a servant leader. Now, on this side of the fence, I would like to see more of the concept of the PM as opposed to being a puppet for management. I would like to see the PM as being a servant leader as well. More of a servant leader, but the word is project manager. So there's always going to be the administrative piece and it comes with the territory. But in my mind, regarding how you would tailor these, it's all about balance. Okay? There might be some things from here that you can inject into the world of predictive. Or there might be some things you can inject from the world of predictive into the world of agile. The risk register is by far one of the most important additions one could take from this world. So, the concept of the risk register as you see fit is not a bad idea. Okay, so this is for open minds. This is not for people who say only agile works or only predictive works. No, it's about looking for the line of best fit. What can I take from here to help my endeavor, whether you call it a product, a project, an event, whatever you want to call it. The bottom line is value. That's what you want to get out of this, right? You want to get value, you want to get benefits that bring that value to the client. And you want the cycle to continue. As there's value, there's a purpose to do more, to get even more value, and the cycle continues. I hope this has been of help to you, and I wish you all the very best in your project management.